But do you see what I'm attempting to point to here? That this is not freedom. You are a prisoner to something. So effectively what's happening here is I am taking the inner sanctum of my nature, my state of being, and I am proclaiming that there is something in the world that has power over that. It's like saying, I am not allowed to be present, at peace, and full of love unless this something out here is doing what I want it to do. That's not freedom. Welcome to the program. My name is Tiger Singleton, and I am hanging out on this live broadcast, doing the thing that I love to do, which is to spontaneously share insight and wisdom about the nature of self and being human, because the more I question, the more I look deeply and ask myself, wait, what's really going on? I start to recognize some profound things. Most notably, all is well. Let me begin by reading something that I wrote and posted online. And I feel like that just might help me set the tone of what I want to dive into. All in all, I feel moved to speak on the subject of real freedom. And of course, we can say in a spiritual context, but I also mean it in a deeply human context. If we can understand that the human experience isn't just about what appears to be going on the surface, that there's another element to this human experience, which is deeply profound and sacred. I guess I say that to express that I don't see a line between spirituality and being human. I see that they are intrinsically tied together. They are the same thing. And so let me read this, and then we'll see where it goes from there. The whole world you see is filtered through how you see yourself. Everything you see shows you how you see you. Everyone you see is to see an aspect of what is going on inside of you. Life is a cosmic mirror that helps you see yourself. This is because this whole human experiment is a lesson in healing the relationship you have with yourself. And also, it's a journey of seeing yourself more clearly, what you really are. This is why the fundamental question that everyone asks is, who am I? Or what am I? This is the driving force, the single question that, when seen clearly, gives you eternal life, liberation from the dream, thrusted into an infinite supply of love. If you see a world that's going to shit, you see you as going to shit. If you see a world that's almost awake, you see yourself as not yet awake. If you see someone as unconscious and lost, that is an unconscious and lost way of seeing them. Listen, the world wakes up when you wake up. When you wake up, you will see that the whole thing has been awake the whole time, and you're the only one who has been asleep at the wheel. The problem you see is only a problem in how or what you see. The only real healing that occurs is the healing of perception, which is to see things more clearly in alignment with how they really are. You are not required to do anything. You're only asked to see reality, to see what's true. If this is seen, then any and all of your doing will automatically be a reflection of what is real and true. This is the nature of right action. Relax. Look beyond the dream that assumes you are separate from what you see. That is a long-winded version of the truth will set you free. My goodness. You know, the world has its idea of freedom. Maybe we can say it's a socially agreed upon assumption about what freedom is. And maybe we can define that as I can be and do anything I want at any time. I'm free. Meaning, in some way, the outside does everything I want it to do so that I can do anything that I want. Isn't that interesting? Like, if you look at that concept of freedom, which is unlimited choice to choose from, I can go here, I can go there, I can buy this, I can buy that. I'm free. I find that an interesting idea because it almost assumes that the outside just does what you want it to do. Which is interesting because that freedom that is received or taken doesn't extend freedom in return, right? It doesn't give freedom to everything to be what it needs to be or wants to be. In fact, it says, for me to be free, I need you to be what I want you to be. And of course, I'm not saying that this is everyone's idea of freedom, but I'm spelling it out this way to set the tone and create an awesome contrast. But just notice that for a second, that there could be this idea of freedom that says, the world is how I want it to be, and I can move around in any way that I choose, and everything that I want is given to me, and see how, in a way, that says that my freedom means that everything is my prisoner, that I'm free, but nothing else is free. That's interesting. And of course, like so much of the social consensus, it's my, let's say, view that is completely upside down. Upside down in the way that the world sees freedom is that it's given from the outside, or it has something to do with the outside being a particular way, which is fascinating because if your freedom comes from the outside, then in your desire to be free, you are now a prisoner to the outside. Like, for example, and we can look at this very playfully without it being serious at all. If your government is the giver of freedom, your government can also be the taker of freedom. And so, in order to receive freedom from that something, you have to be and do how that something wants you to be in order to receive the freedom that they're offering. And again, practically, whatever, that's fine. But my point is saying that it's not really freedom. If your freedom is given to you by someone else, it's not really yours. And my interest is figuring out what these things really are. Like, if freedom was really freedom and it was innate in me as a sovereign human being, if I were to really be free, what would that really look like? And what would that really mean? And the foundation of this discovery into what real freedom is has a requirement of discovery that I have to be able to see that my inner experience as a human being is not dictated by anything outside of what I am. Meaning, anything that I experience emotionally, whether it's an elation or a disturbance, is not created by the outside. These are all emotional states of being that are simply responding to the perception that I have about a particular situation. If I see something in a shitty way, I'll feel shitty. Likewise, I can see something in a different way that offers a completely different internal experience. And this for me is inescapable. There's simply no way around it. And I can understand, where that's just not seen for some people, because I understand that space of not seeing it. And it really looks like somebody else has the power to make you tell a story which your emotions respond to. Another thing to address is the sincerity of desire as it relates to what are you really looking for in the experience of freedom. And the way that I can point towards that is to attempt to make it clear that everything you seem to want on the surface of life or in the world or from others is because you're fundamentally craving an internal experience, or you're craving to avoid a particular internal experience. And this is fascinating to me. In one way, it's profoundly simple, but it's fascinating in part because of how much it goes unnoticed. Fascinating in the way that on the surface, it can appear that we want something and we can really believe that we want it. But in so many instances, if not all instances where there's anxiety behind the wanting, you're actually wanting something much deeper than what appears on the surface. And one of my favorite illustrations, of course, is the man who anxiously says, "I want $1 billion," is secretly in his heart saying, "I wish I could relax." Some flavor of that. And so there's this false association with the outside that says there is this something in the world that has this treasure called relaxation. I call it $1 billion, but I think it has the key to relaxation, which is an internal state of being. So effectively what's happening here is I am taking the inner sanctum of my nature, my state of being, and I am proclaiming that there is something in the world that has power over that. Therefore, I become a prisoner to this something called money, where if it seems like I have enough, I allow myself to relax. And if it seems like I don't, then I don't allow myself to relax, even though I might not be aware that it's my own allowing. But do you see what I'm attempting to point to here? That this is not freedom. You are a prisoner to something. It's like saying, I am not allowed to be present, at peace, and full of love unless this something out here is doing what I want it to do. That's not freedom, which is funny because we can have this something that we call financial freedom, which is amazingly a perspective that is not solid at all. Meaning I can have a number in my mind that says, oh, if I had so much money, then I would have financial freedom. And of course, the assumption there is in the financial freedom, I can finally relax. But I can't tell you how many times I've experienced having lots of money, again, relative, and still feeling like it's not enough, right? We've had that number maybe where it's like, oh man, if only I had this much money in the bank, then I could totally relax. And then of course I would get that much money in the bank and then I'd be afraid of losing it. And now I need more to protect the amount I'm afraid of losing. So I still can't relax. And it shows you the ephemeral nature of all of these things that we are wanting in the world, that we are prisoner to. Of course, this also speaks to the nature of relationship, where the same dynamic plays out because money is something you are in relationship to. So it's the same with another human being, where we can say, oh, if only someone loved me, then I could relax. And again, relaxed, feel whole, feel complete, know that I'm enough, yada, 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 which is to feel free internally. If only this something on the outside, this person loved me, then I could relax. But of course, when things appear that way, when it appears you found this person and that they love you, now you become afraid of losing them, which of course, in your fear, you can't relax. And this is what happens every time you attach your inner sense of freedom to something on the outside, because you're giving your power to the something on the outside that you're separate from, which you don't really have control over, which introduces an element of fear. And this happens every time you perceive yourself as separate from what you want. And in the illusion of getting it, there will automatically be the fear of losing it. And that can be expressed in a minor or major way. And don't get me wrong, this is beautifully human. It's totally allowed, and in a large part, it's unavoidable. But I find it profoundly helpful that even in the playful chaos of my humanness, to recognize this subtle truth underneath the surface, because it invites me and makes space for me to release my grip on the outside as I recognize, oh, that's not really what I want. Even though I see it on the surface, I see that it's not nearly as serious as my mind is making it out to be, which of course invites me to engage it in a much more playful way. Like, for example, I can appreciate and enjoy the love my girlfriend expresses. But I also know in a deep level that the love I'm experiencing isn't coming from the outside. It's not coming from her. And this is fascinating too, because what's really happening is my conditions have been met, whereas I allow myself to feel a particular flavor of love. Right? When somebody cuddles up close to me and kisses my face gently, then there's a certain condition that opens a floodgate of love from the inside, where I allow that particular flavor to be felt. Do you see how this works? Where we have these imagined scenarios, which are circumstances or conditions, where we say, okay, if it looks like this, then it's safe for me to feel this way or that way. Right? If my bank account looks like this, let's say positive, then I allow myself to relax. If it looks negative, then I am required to freak out. And again, practically human, perfectly fine. But for me, the deeper question is, but what's really going on? That's what's fascinating, because when I ask what's really going on, I see that this is all just happening in the imagination. Which is also to say that I can only imagine myself as a prisoner. Which is also to say, furthermore, that beyond all of that imagination of being a prisoner, what I really am is already free. Because any absence of freedom is only imaginary. Because the real freedom that I'm craving doesn't have to do with experience or condition. Because what I'm really craving is an internal state of being, which in truth isn't held captive by anything in the world beyond my imagination of it being so. And for me, this is real freedom. It's a real freedom that knows that I am not disturbed by anything out there. It's a freedom that recognizes that as I go through this life, I am untouched by the world. I'm untouched by what anyone says. I'm untouched by what anyone does. And the only thing I'm going to experience is my imagination of being touched. And of course, the mind wants to take this extremes, which is, for example, playfully, yeah, Tiger, but what if somebody punches you in your face? Then you're really touched. Well, again, if I assume that what I am is the body, then if somebody touches the body, then I can interpret that as being personal and it's about me. But the same could be said about my hair, or let's imagine that I had hair. I can say the hair is me too. So if I cut it off and give it to you and you set it on fire, then you're setting me on fire. No, I'm not the hair. Now, again, granted, if somebody punches me in my face, there'll be a pain response. And again, what I'm experiencing is the interpretations and the meaning that I wrap around all of this. Like, for example, if I encounter somebody that is violent, somebody who is unkind, do you see that there are infinite ways of interpreting that experience, which also means there's infinite feeling states, because you're going to feel in accordance to what you see. Like, if I'm looking at this person and I'm thinking, oh, this is a terrible human being who is undeserving of love, I will feel in accordance with that perception. Now, if I see things more deeply, which we won't really get into here and now because I talk about it all the time, the more I see what's really going on, which, let's fast forward, is to see that it's not really personal, that their unkindness isn't really about me, that their unkindness is a reflection of what's going on inside of themselves, which is to say the lack of love that they are expressing is a lack of love they feel for what they are, which is a massive confusion that doesn't see the truth of what they are, inspires in me a compassion for the human being, which is to get out of my own way and see the heart of another, which is a completely different experience than taking personal how they are showing up or behaving, or even their actions. And this is brilliant to observe, that as you encounter how other people move in the world, the degree to which you take it personally will be the degree to which you suffer over it. And to take it personally, to make it about yourself, is this same confusion that gives your power to somebody else, which is effectively like saying the thoughts in somebody else's mind have something to do with me. And that's just silly. In the same way that your thoughts about other people don't really have anything to do with other people. You're not even thinking about other people. You're thinking about your idea of other people, and other people are not your idea of them. I wonder if you can see, beyond all of this commotion of thinking, there's such a profound stillness that's untouched by this whole show the mind imagines to be happening. And it's in that presence, beyond all the noise, that the truth of what you are is wildly free and wildly untouched by it all. And for me, of course, this is the fundamental pointer of spirituality, is to wake up and see this truth, which is to wake up and see what is really happening, which is you're creating it all. You're imagining it all. And that's fine. The mind likes to say, oh, that means it's bad. That means I shouldn't imagine. No, I'm not saying it at all. I'm just saying I'm inviting. And I question using this word, but to take responsibility for your creation, which is also a degree of emotional intelligence. Understanding where your emotions actually come from. And to have what I call a total experiential accountability, which for me rescues what I am in these moments of confusion, which is remembering or being open to see that I am only experiencing what I am. I cannot experience anything outside of what I am. This is also like saying my emotions do not respond to something outside of what I am. They are responding to my creation, which is beautiful because now I can just love everyone. Because it's nobody else's fault that I'm telling these stories that hurt my own feelings. It's so beautiful to see, right? It's like you encounter someone that has a different opinion of you, and it touches a nerve of your deeply held political ideology, and you think you're emotionally disturbed because they're wrong, they don't agree, yada, yada, yada. And then you wake up and realize that your emotional disturbance doesn't have anything to do with them. You are adorably protecting a silly idea of who you think you are, which is so far removed from the reality of what you are. And the more you move to protect it, the more polarized you become in your silly idea that you know what's right and everyone else doesn't, which you really need to believe to hold on to your identity that is held together by this belief system or idea, which again is all happening in the imagination. Now, the ego doesn't like this form of freedom, which is a stumbling block for the ego wrapped up in spirituality. Because of course the ego comes into spirituality and says, oh, this is going to help me get what I want in the world. No, this is going to help you let go of the world and let go of the ego. And the ego doesn't really want that. The ego is terrified of this kind of freedom because the ego, again, is convinced that its validation comes from the outside. It needs the outside for its survival. And what I'm telling you is that there is no outside. That's bad news for the ego. The ego sees itself as something that is separate from everything else. Of course, that's how it exists, right? The nature of itself is its own independent thing, separate from everything else. And so it needs to constantly reinforce its separation from everything else, which means it constantly has to give its power away to something else for its own survival. Again, this is to believe or to identify with the ego, meaning, yes, there is this something called ego, which is the idea you have of yourself, and that's unavoidable. That's never going away. But the identification with it, which is to assume it's what you are, is what creates the, let's call it, intensity of defensiveness that needs to survive it. But what I'm pointing to is to recognize how non-real it is, which means it doesn't need to be survived. It can be there and it can be helpful. It's just not serious. And maybe a beautiful way to illustrate this is going back to something that I talk about all the time. Let's look at your ego as the piece you are using to play a game. Like, let's imagine the classic example I use is Monopoly. When you play Monopoly, you get a certain piece, right? And you need that piece in order to play the game. You can't play the game if you don't have a piece. Now imagine you think that piece is what you really are. And its worth and value is tied up in the game. Meaning, the money you get in the game, you interpret as meaning something about your piece, which you think is you. Again, do you see the identification? Do you see the imaginary scenario or the dream where this is assumed to be real? And so everything that happens in the game, you interpret as happening to your piece, which is seen to be you. Therefore, you think it's happening to you. And the freedom is to wake up and realize that not only is this piece in the game not you, but everything that happens in the game isn't happening to you. Furthermore, whether you win or lose the game, your piece winning or losing the game doesn't have anything to do with you. Which is also like recognizing there's nothing to be afraid of while you're playing the game, which is to be free as you play the game. And as you're playing the game, you start to recognize that there's a more sincere opportunity in the game, which is to play and learn without even trying to learn. It's something that happens naturally. You just show up and play, and you connect deeply with the other players. It's very difficult to connect deeply with the other players if you are threatened by them getting more points than you. That will be a massive block from being present and connected with other players. And you see, you become a prisoner to the game. And spirituality, beautifully so, is simply saying, oh, my dear sweetheart, wake up from this game. This character that you think you are is just imaginary. This whole game is going back in the box when we're done. It'll be over. Nothing is remembered. There's no tally sheet of how many points you got. It's not even about you. And, you know, if we just get honest about our human experience, isn't it just so obvious that this is the dilemma? That in some way we're taking this seriously? And when I say taking this seriously, we're taking ourselves seriously in the way that we are trying to protect who we think we are, which is also trying to protect who we think, or we're trying to protect what we want other people to think about us, which is trying to protect who you think you are. And that's something that is maybe fun to pay attention to see how much you think about this character you think you are, how much you think about what you think other people are thinking about in relationship to you, about this character that doesn't even exist. And something else that's wild, and it's fascinating that I get to just show up here and repeat myself constantly. But something that really makes this stand out for me is if I look at this character of me that I think about all the time, this character exists 100% in my imagination. Can we just acknowledge that? Like, that character is not here right now. It's not in reality. And it's only there when I'm thinking about it. This character in my mind that might appear to be so important, that needs to be protected, that needs to be defended. Again, it's in my imagination. Nobody else in the whole world can see that character. But yet that character thinks it's being seen by the whole world. It thinks as if it's being seen by the whole world. It obsesses as if that was the case. It's obsessing over nothing. It's obsessing about something that's impossible. Can you see this? Nobody else can see who you think you are. Everybody else will create their own character for you in their game, and you can't even see the character that they create for you. Nobody sees anyone else. In the same way, the characters that you create for everyone else, these are reflections of how you see yourself. These are little mirrors that you create that help you see yourself more clearly, in such a way that everyone else that you see in this life is to see aspects of yourself. Why? Because this is an exercise of discovering the self, which is an exercise in healing how you see yourself, which is waking up to the truth of what you are. This is why everywhere you go, you see a reflection. Everywhere you go is to see how you see, which is filtered through how you see yourself. Ta-da! Welcome to the Spiritual Magic Show. For me, real freedom is seeing this. Because in seeing this, I let go of everyone. I let go of the whole world. Because I know that the whole world and everyone out there is not my problem. My problem is only and always how I see. And fundamentally and unavoidably, the more my perception is out of alignment with the truth of reality, the more I will experience painful emotion. So if I encounter emotional disturbance, painful emotion, it is an alarm that is inviting me to question what it is I think I'm seeing, so that I can introduce some clarity and see things more in alignment with what's true, which will result in a more pleasant emotional experience. This is also to simply restore the flow of love, which is to get out of my own damn way. That's fun. I love my job. Can I just say that? I love that this is what I get to do and repeat myself constantly. And I never get tired of it because it's always amazing and it's always fascinating. And I love just talking to other human beings about their experience and unwrapping this gift together. It's so wild and beautiful, the degree that we don't see this. Like, the depth of this miracle is always there. The profound nature of what we are seeing right now the fact that this is all just love and there's nothing to be afraid of, the truth of reality, it's always there. And yet we're living our human lives, we're going through our relationships, we're doing our jobs, and we don't see it. We are adorably and appropriately and understandably blinded by our own assumptions and conditioning that assumes there's so much going on that isn't going on. And in this, we get lost in it to the degree that we have a difficult time connecting with ourselves, connecting with the people that we care about, and also showing up in a world that is, let's just say, more grounded, loving, and playful. And there's such a beautiful opportunity to take a moment and check in with what's real and realize what's actually going on so that you can enjoy your human experience to whatever degree that you can. And the beauty of it is, this can't not work. This can't not work. It's like it's impossible to not make progress if you, let's say, have the right willingness of heart and conditions to take time and investigate these things. Essentially, if you're not in a coma, because your whole life is constantly offering experiential opportunities to see things more clearly. And beautifully so, we get to support each other in this. This is what I love about relationship dynamics, is not only are they a mirror, but we are, in a beautiful way, even unknowingly, helping each other see this more deeply. And the more you know that that's happening, then the more constructive it is. The more willing you are to learn the lesson and pay attention. Wild. Thanks for hanging out. Appreciate you.